Right now on Morning News Now, the White House is calling it Liberation Day. This morning, President Trump set to unveil a sweeping set of reciprocal tariffs on all U.S. trade partners.
April 2nd, 2025 will go down as one of the most important days in modern American history. It's simple. If you make your product in America, you will pay no tariffs.
We have team coverage as anticipation and anxiety grow from Washington to Wall Street. Plus, voters in Wisconsin sending an early warning to the GOP this morning. Liberals keeping control of the state's top court, despite that costly campaign effort by top Trump advisor billionaire Elon Musk. Meanwhile, in Florida, relief for Republicans as they add to their slim majority in the House. We will bring you the results from yesterday's special elections. Also, it's getting real. That's right. The deadline to get a real ID now just 5 weeks away. And DMV offices across the country are packed. We'll explain what happens if you don't get your new ID in time. And remembering a legend this morning, Hollywood mourning the death of Val Kilmer, the critically acclaimed actor best known for his wide range of leading roles from Batman to Tombstone. We'll look back at his life and decades-long career. He will be helping us remember him this morning.
Exactly, and if you're, of course, a Top Gun fan, he was Iceman, which is perhaps his most legendary role, so we will remember him coming up. Good to have you with us this morning. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We're going to begin this hour at the White House, where later today, President Trump will unveil a new package of what he calls reciprocal tariffs on U.S. trading partners around the world. The specific details of Mr. Trump's tariffs are still unclear, but the White House says the new duties will come into effect immediately after the president announces his plans this afternoon. This is in addition to that separate 25% tariff on auto imports, which is due to take effect tomorrow.
The tariffs are likely to spark global retaliation, deepening a trade war that could have a major impact on the world economy and financial markets. But the Trump administration says the new tariffs are aimed at boosting U.S. manufacturing and hitting back at alleged unfair trading practices. Here's how the White House press secretary responded yesterday when asked by a reporter if the president is sure these measures will work.
They're not going to be wrong. It is going to work. And the president has a brilliant team of advisors who have been studying these issues for decades. And we are focused on restoring the golden age of America and making America a manufacturing superpower.
Here to talk more about all this, NBC News senior White House correspondent Garrett Haake and NBC's business and data correspondent Brian Chung. Good morning to both of you. Garrett, let's start with you. I mean, what can you tell us about what the president is expected to announce later today? We still don't really know all the details, right?
No, Joe, it's striking to hear the press secretary make that promise because even as she was discussing how she's certain these measures will work, the measures themselves were undecided. The White House trade team was still meeting late yesterday to try to nail down exactly what specifically they will be rolling out today at 4 o'clock, notably after the markets close, to keep the president's promise to try to balance out these unfair trade practices he sees around the world. Broadly speaking, there are a couple of options in front of them. They can place sort of country-specific tariffs on goods, all goods coming from individual countries that the White House has said would be global, not just focused on some of the most egregious or most unbalanced trade partners that the U.S. has around the world. Or they can target the tariffs more specifically to specific goods and specific industries that come out of these countries. As we're looking for clues around the world for what exactly will be in this package, I can tell you the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, said yesterday that what gets announced today will essentially be the high water mark for these tariffs and that it's possible that the ultimate rates could be negotiated back down over time. But as we stand here this morning, it's not clear whether a final decision has been made by the president about what will be in this package or exactly what is in that final decision. It's striking, given the market-moving nature of what we're expected to see announced today, Joe.
And Brian, let's bring you in here. In addition, as we mentioned, to this announcement we're waiting on, we've got these auto tariffs. You spent all day yesterday at a car dealership.
Yeah.
How are consumers feeling about this, and what will be the real-life impact immediately when you go try to buy a car?
Yeah, well, consumers that we talk to, as well as people that work at the dealership, were telling us that there is this kind of questioning out there among people who, by the way, when it comes to buying a car, it's a major big-ticket purchase. In many cases, they're budgeting out for years to make that buy. And they're all saying, look, I don't know when the tariffs will take effect. I don't know when the prices will increase, and I don't know what the magnitude of those price increases will be. be. But you have Goldman Sachs and some other Wall Street banks that are projecting for a foreign car, prices could go up by as much as $15,000 as a result of that 25% tariff, which is separate from what Garrett was talking about and will be announced today. It was announced by the White House last week, but it will take effect tonight into tomorrow morning. But again, it could be weeks, not months, is what we're hearing based off of industry sources for those prices to begin increasing on vehicles, on consumers. So if you are looking at buying a car and we're already going to buy a car, it might not hurt to go out sooner rather than later and make that purchase.
The Trump administration is clearly projecting confidence about this. White House trade advisor Peter Navarro estimates they would net our economy, these tariffs, between $600 and $700 billion a year. Has he explained what shape those numbers take, and what are economists saying about all of this?
Well, I mean, Joe, just like the actual contours of the tariffs themselves, it's really unclear about exactly how the money would be taken in as part of these tariffs. And I want to point out as well that the tone has noticeably shifted as well. When we first talked about the 25% tariffs on Canada and Mexico, which were stayed for a month, they would be reintroduced effective whatever the announcement would be today. But that was a fentanyl conversation. They were saying this is not a trade war. This is about the drug war and stopping the flow of fentanyl into the United States. Haven't heard that much about that recently. And now it's all about the money that we would get as a result of these tariffs. How is that kind of threaded through the needle? We'll have to see based off of the announcement later on today.
All right, Brian, thank you. Garrett, also last night, I do want to ask you, we're obviously seeing pushback to this, including from New Jersey's Democratic Senator Cory Booker breaking the record for the longest ever Senate speech. It was over 25 hours. Tell us about what he had to say.
Yeah, look, Democrats have wanted to see their elected representatives in Washington fight back against Donald Trump more. There are very, very few tools available to elected Democrats in the minority, but one of them is to hold the floor for as long as possible. Cory Booker took that to the maximum extent possible, breaking the record for the longest modern Senate speech, casting opposition to a variety of Trump policies in moral terms, essentially as a fight of good versus evil. He even sort of cast the tariffs and the economic picture in that same framework. Listen to a very small excerpt of a very long speech from Senator Booker.
What does his Liberation Day mean to the people that are shackled to debt? From medical debt, that are shackled with student debt, that can't afford the rising costs of groceries. What does his liberation mean to people who can't afford homes because of his tariffs, who dreamed of a new car, but that's going to go up as well?
What you're seeing there, I think, is a preview of how you'll see Democrats push back against this tariff announcement today if indeed prices go up, contrasting Donald Trump's lofty language about liberation with the on-the-ground reality of rising prices. Savannah, Joe?
And Garrett, no bathroom breaks, is that right?
No bathroom breaks. He couldn't even sit down, Joe. This is a very long time standing up. The senator, who's a vegan, said he did it without any kind of bathroom aid, let's say, other than dehydrating himself in advance to make sure he didn't have anywhere to be but the Senate floor.
All right, Garrett, Brian, thank you both. Appreciate
Really
it.
something. Thank you, gentlemen. All right, voters in Wisconsin and Florida have cast their ballots in the first elections of President Trump's second term. NBC News projects that Democrat Susan Crawford has won a seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court, defeating former Republican Attorney General Brad Schimmel. Now, the win allows liberals to maintain their narrow majority in the state's highest court.
The race gained national attention after Trump advisor Elon Musk spent millions of dollars to oppose her. It became the most expensive state Supreme Court race in U.S. history. In Florida, Republican candidates came out on top in a pair of special congressional elections in the state, though their margins were smaller than Trump's margins in November. The win pads Republicans' small majority in the House of Representatives.
NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent and host of Way Too Early on MSNBC, Ali Vitale, joins us with the latest here. Ali, let's begin with this big win for Democrats last night in Wisconsin and for Susan Crawford in this closely watched Supreme Court race. How big of a setback is that for President Trump and, you know, by association, Elon Musk, especially after we saw him campaigning, giving out those $1 million checks there?
Yeah, I got to say, first of all, I love it when we get some early sense of the election music. That is, of course, my favorite. So here we are with that. But look, for folks in the White House, this is them digesting a big loss and Democrats trying to figure out if they have found a key for the upcoming 2026 midterm elections. Because you're right, this is technically a nonpartisan race for the state Supreme Court, but it had partisan players all over it, not least among them Elon Musk, who was there on the ground, not just putting in millions of dollars, but also sporting a cheese head. It doesn't get more Wisconsin politics than that. And trying to apply what he's doing with DOJ, as well as what Republicans in Congress are allowing the Trump administration to do, directly into this state Supreme Court race that also had key issues in it, like abortion and like voting rights. All of those culminated in Democrats not just notching a win here, but doing so by a 10-point margin. So Democrats feeling like they've learned how to use Elon Musk in a political sense, and Republicans trying to figure out if Musk is someone who can drag them down in future contests.
So, Allie, let's talk about Florida, because you have two Republicans victorious in special congressional races there. They were expected to win. That's not the surprise. The real question was the margins, right?
The margins and how. So you look at the fact that both of these Republicans were able to keep their seats, but they did so by half of the margin that their Republican predecessors had done in 2024. Now, there's a few reasons for that. Turnout in off-year elections is always difficult to predict. When you have Trump on the ballot, as you did in 2024, especially in his adopted home state, that certainly helps bring turnout up, and that might have helped Matt Gaetz and Mike Waltz, who were the people that held these seats prior, to win by as large margins as they did. But look, Florida is red, especially when you look at that Florida 1st congressional district. It's in the panhandle of the state, much more conservative area, consistently so. And so the fact that they won by half of the margins, not a 30-point margin, but more of like a 14, 15-point margin, it's notable for Democrats and Republicans alike.
Allie, also, we want to ask you about Senator Cory Booker as well. This 25-plus hours, no bathroom breaks, fun fact there. Do you think this is a moment that Democrats can build off of?
This is the fight that many in the grassroots are asking lawmakers to show. And so Booker going on the Senate floor like that, not just talking in the ways that Garrett mentioned about the policies of the Trump administration and casting them as good versus evil, but also notching a record here and putting himself in the congressional record books, doing so in a way that might remind viewers that the arc of the universe does bend towards justice and progress. The man who he replaced at the top of the list of longest Senate floor speeches was Strom Thurmond, a Southern senator who at that point used his remarks to rail against integration. He was a pro-segregationist, a racist, and so Booker being able to unseat him there and saying that he stands on that Senate floor able to make this history in spite of members like Strom Thurmond. So a nice cap there. And also, I got to say, I want to see this guy's Oura Ring data. As an Oura Ring wearer myself, his office says he's going to release it, so I got to see that.
All right. Big breaking news there. Allie, real quick, we should talk about what happened in the House. It was actually a big defeat yesterday for Speaker Mike Johnson. A group of House Republicans sank an effort by Johnson trying to kill a plan that would allow remote voting for lawmakers who become new parents. Tell us about this.
Yeah, this is a battle over proxy voting. Basically, can you assign another member to vote for you while you are out on either maternity leave or other things? And this is something that Republican Anna Paulina Luna of Florida was pushing. She had support from Democrat Brittany Peterson and others. But ultimately, Johnson tried to get rid of this effort. He's not a fan of proxy voting. Republicans then coming to the aid of Democrats and helping to defeat this move by the Speaker. It's a stunning rebuke by Republicans of their leadership, not the kind of thing that you see often. And because of it, Johnson basically said, OK, I'm going to turn this legislative car around. No more votes this week. They have to come back this next week, though, and deal with it because of the amount of support that it has. It's not a fight that's over.
All right. Allie Vitale, thank you very much.
April is off to a stormy start for much of the country. Storms swept through the Midwest and South, and now millions are at risk for severe weather today. Tornadoes, heavy rain, life-threatening flash flooding are expected to continue, stretching from Texas all the way up to Michigan. This new round of weather comes on the heels of a storm system that killed at least 7 people, battering parts of the Midwest and the South. It spawned several possible tornadoes like this one in Alabama. It's not just storms. Parts of the southern Rockies and high plains are dealing with an increased fire danger because of dry conditions and gusty winds.
Let's get a closer look at what to expect from these severe storms with your Morning News Now weather.
Meteorologist Angie Lastman joins us now. Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning. A couple of busy days ahead of us, and we've already ramped things up this morning. It's only going to increase here as we get through the later parts of today and specifically in the next couple of days when it comes to flooding concerns. But those severe storms off to a quick start this morning. We've got tornado watches in effect for much of Oklahoma, a sliver of Kansas, parts of Missouri, and a little bit of the northwest corner of Arkansas. That's going to last until noon Central Time, and you can see why. Plenty of thunderstorm warnings as well, with this line of thunderstorms marching its way to the east. This is going to continue shifting to the east through the day today. Of course, we'll get some of that kind of daytime heating going, and we've got a really expansive area that we're looking at for severe weather today. And this is nothing to blink at. We've got a moderate risk for areas like Little Rock, El Dorado, Nashville into that enhanced risk. But take a look at the pink, that high risk, Memphis to Paducah. That is a location that we're looking at to see a good chance for us to see some of these large EF3 multiple long track tornadoes. And it's for a good chunk of the country. Again, Indianapolis, Lexington, Nashville, Memphis, Little Rock, all major cities that are included in this. But the risk extends up into Chicago, Cleveland, Detroit, Springfield, Tyler, all included in that here as we get through the later parts of today. Now, the problem is we're going to continue to see this kind of same system stuck in a way. And that means that we've got severe risk for a good chunk of the country again for tomorrow. So 42 million people, Washington, D.C. to Dallas, dealing with the hail. That'll be the main threat. And then as we get into Friday, more of the same similar areas that are under these severe risks, Texas basically extending into the Midwest. That is just one of the impacts that we're concerned about here as we go through the next couple of days. Once we get through the severe weather, we've got the potential to see a very impressive, life-threatening flooding situation occurring for really the same spots that are dealing with the severe weather. So not only could some locations see the potential for EF3 or EF4 tornadoes to occur, but they also will see torrential rain happening over multiple days in the same spot. And we're looking at significant flooding because of that. So, guys, we already have these flood alerts up for 33 million people. These are going to last through Sunday. We've got flash flood risks for the next couple of days. And by the time this is all said and done, we could see up to 15 inches of rain across this region. This is really concerning. People definitely need to be staying weather aware over the next few days.
Certainly. Thank you, Angie.
You got it.
Today, Hollywood is mourning the loss of one of its most versatile actors. Actor Val Kilmer, known for playing iconic roles, Batman, Jim Morrison. He died yesterday from pneumonia. He was just 65 years old.
Kilmer rose to fame playing Iceman, the rival to Tom Cruise's Maverick, in the 1986 classic Top Gun. He went on to become one of the top-paid actors of the 1990s, someone who could play the good guy and the bad guy. Kilmer later shared his life story in a documentary that premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 2021.
I see myself as a sensitive, intelligent human being, but with the soul of a clown.
Now, despite battling health issues, he returned to the screen one final time 3 years ago, reprising his role as Iceman in Top Gun Maverick shortly after Kilmer's death was announced last night. Actor Josh Brolin posted this tribute to his friend, writing, quote, "You were a smart, challenging, brave, uber creative firecracker. There's not a lot of those."
Not a lot left of those. I stumbled over that earlier today, too. It was strange wording. Entertainment journalist and pop culture expert Brian Balthazar joins us now with more on this. Brian, 65 is so young, but we do know he was having health struggles. He was battling cancer. He had a procedure on his trachea that really made it so that he couldn't act much anymore. I mean, talk about his life more recently.
Right. So we do know that as you mentioned, in 2014, he had cancer. We don't know exactly what led to today, except that his daughter, Mercedes, is saying that he had pneumonia. Now, pneumonia can creep up with people who have immune-compromised systems as well as respiratory problems. And he had two, as you said, tracheotomies to treat his throat cancer, radiation, chemotherapy. So he's really been through it. He was really private about his illness for many years until that documentary that you referred to. But this is a man who came back in that Top Gun Maverick movie. His voice had to be digitally recreated to improve the sound of his voice, and that was really an iconic moment because that is, as you said, the film that he really became known for back in his early days of his career as Iceman in the original film starring Tom Cruise in 1986. And really what a career he's had, more than 80 roles between film and television over the course of his life.
And in 1992, the famous film critic Roger Ebert, he wrote specifically about him. He said, if there's an award for the most unsung leading man of his generation, Kilmer should get it. Let's talk about some of those leading roles. What were some of his best performances?
Right. Well, you mentioned Unsung, and that's because he never was nominated for a Golden Globe or an Oscar in the course of his career. Some of the most amazing roles, one of them obviously playing Jim Morrison in The Doors in 1991. And in 1993, he played Doc Holliday in Tombstone, another one of those roles. These two roles in particular are where we heard some of the stories of his reputation as a method actor. And for those people who don't know what method acting is, it's they immerse themselves in the role so much so. In the case of The Doors, he insisted on being called Jim Morrison. Jennifer Tilly tells the story that even at the audition, there was sort of a cattle call for some of the supporting players. He pulled up in a car, shirtless and in leather pants, with his hair wild and music blaring. And she said, from that moment on, we knew there was no one else that could play him. He insisted on being called Jim during the course of shooting. And in the movie Tombstone, his character dies of tuberculosis. So he had set dressers fill his bed with ice, the bed that he would be dying in, so that he could replicate the shivering and weird feelings that come from being frigidly cold, and he said it was quite effective, and it was one of the roles that people remember him for.
It truly is. There were pros and cons to what you mentioned. After working together on the island of Dr. Moreau in '96, the directors said there were two things he would never do again: climb Mount Everest and work with Val Kilmer. I mean, that's part of the story of Val Kilmer. He was tough to work with.
It is, and he even and he came to accept that later in his life. In the documentary, I think there's really a pretty spot-on quote where he says, "I have behaved poorly, I have behaved bravely, I have behaved bizarrely to some. I deny none of this and have no regrets because I have lost and found parts of myself that I never knew existed, and I am blessed." And what a way to summarize an incredible career ranging that started out as comedy in Top Secret and went on to be Top Gun and really left a great impression on theater goers for decades.
That's what makes you an icon. There you go. Brian, thank you so much for joining us this morning for this
Brian.
look back. All right.
Thank you.
Much more to come here on Morning News Now. Later this hour, changing the game. The NFL announcing a series of new rules for this coming season. What fans need to know.
Up first, the developing news out of the Middle East as Israeli forces intensify their ground assault on the Gaza Strip. Stay with us. We are back with Israel's expanding ground assault on the Gaza Strip. Earlier today, Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz said on X that the army would seize, quote, large areas of the enclave to add to Israel's buffer zones and put pressure on Hamas. He repeated Israel's claim the only way to win the war is to expel Hamas and return all hostages. This comes as the humanitarian crisis in Gaza continues to worsen. The United Nations dismissed a claim by Israel that there is enough food in Gaza as ridiculous after all bakeries supported by the World Food Program shut down on Tuesday. Officials in Gaza say they only have enough supplies to provide hot meals for 2 more weeks. NBC News international correspondent Matt Bradley joins us from Tel Aviv with more on this. Matt, good morning. So what more do we know about this offensive, and how have the families of the Israeli hostages reacted to this news?
Yeah, good morning, Savannah. So what we're hearing now from Israel Katz, the defense minister, is an echo of what he had said previously, that they are going to be taking more ground and, curiously, holding it permanently. Annexing it was the language that he has used previously, as well as other top Israeli officials have expressed the same thing. Now, this is in addition to the pounding that the Israelis are delivering against the people of Gaza, they say, targeting Hamas targets. This is very troubling to Palestinians and to Arabs all across the region. The idea that Israel will not just be moving in militarily into the Gaza Strip and expanding its operations there, but it will also be permanently taking and holding and annexing land. This is something that is a very contentious and very controversial statement, even above and beyond the deadly fighting that we've been seeing. And you asked me about those hostages' families, and we did hear from them. They said that this is indeed very, very troubling. But they've been saying the same thing ever since Israel broke that ceasefire and returned to fighting back more than 2 weeks ago. They say, and they disagree with what you mentioned, what the top Israeli officials like Benjamin Netanyahu, the prime minister, have been saying, that it is only negotiations, they believe, that will free those remaining several dozen hostages, not military pressure.
Tell us about the latest with aid groups working to get supplies into the Gaza Strip.
Yeah, well, it sounds as though these aid groups are continuing to try to actually send trucks into the Gaza Strip. But this is a very contentious issue here. Even when there was aid that was going in, it was very controversial, and right-wing protesters and other groups tried to physically block those aid trucks from going in. But now we're seeing, as you mentioned, the United Nations and other aid agencies are saying that there's no flour left in the Gaza Strip, which means that people there are going to be experiencing even more hunger than they had been in the past. And as we saw earlier, this is now well more than a month since the Israelis said that they were going to be blocking all aid into the Gaza Strip. They also have blocked electricity into a vital desalination plant that had provided a lot of fresh water. The UN had already warned that not only is there going to be a problem with hunger, but now with fresh water, many people in the Gaza Strip are now drinking brackish water, which is a combination of fresh water and salt water.
Matt, also amidst all of this, the U.S. is continuing its attacks on Houthi rebels in Yemen. The Houthis had said one strike killed at least 4 people. That was near a Red Sea port city. What's the latest there?
Yeah, these were a number of strikes all across rebel-held areas of Yemen. And we've heard from Caroline Leavitt, who's the spokeswoman for the White House last night. She said that there's been well more than 200 strikes in all. The Houthis have said that in addition to those 4 people who died just overnight, that there have been more than 50 people who have been killed in the latest round of bombardments by the United States. Now, we can expect to see more. We've heard this from the Pentagon, saying that this is all going to be continuing on an unrelenting pace against the Houthis until freedom of navigation is restored to the Red Sea and the area around Yemen. But now we're seeing that it was, we're seeing new aircraft carrier fight groups who are heading to the region. There's one there already. The USS Harry Truman is in the region, and they're doing the bulk of the fighting. And now the USS Carney is going to be steaming there from Asia. So now we're going to be seeing 2 major fighting groups in the region pummeling the Houthis as the Trump administration doubles down on their threats against the Houthis and their backers, Iran.
All right, Matt Bradley, thank you for your reporting. Well, 2 Venezuelan women are speaking out, telling their story about how they were mistakenly deported from the U.S. It comes amid growing backlash against the Trump administration for sending hundreds of migrants to a prison in El Salvador without a court hearing. NBC News senior Homeland Security correspondent Julia Ainsley has the exclusive details.
As the legal showdown heats up between the Trump administration and lawyers representing migrants who they say were sent to a prison in El Salvador without due process and perhaps mistakenly, we were able to speak exclusively with 2 women who say they were sent to El Salvador and then turned around. Listen to their story. The images sparked a legal showdown over President Trump's mass deportations. Alleged gang members arriving on flights to a notorious prison in El Salvador. 2 women who say they were on those planes speaking exclusively to NBC News.
We were lied to. When we arrived at our destination, that's when they told us we were in El Salvador.
Hemar Moyatones tells us she was arrested by ICE and was expecting to be deported home to Venezuela. Scarlett Rodriguez says she used the Biden administration's CBP One app to get across the border.
We are from Venezuela. We know that airport. And we were like, no, we are not in Venezuela.
Both women say they have no criminal history and are not part of a gang. Consistent with court declarations, she said she witnessed an official push 3 men to sign papers claiming they were gang members.
And there was a man who said no, that he wasn't going to sign it because he had nothing to do with that. And the official came and said whether we sign or don't sign the paper, they were going to leave us there.
The women are now back at a U.S. detention facility after El Salvador's president refused to take female prisoners. Moyatones says she's worried about her 2-year-old son, left with a relative in Pennsylvania.
I am very afraid because I've always been with my son.
There's now a legal battle over the Trump administration's use of wartime powers for some deportations. The administration said it mistakenly sent a Maryland man to El Salvador, despite an immigration judge's order saying he could not be deported there. His attorney says he was not a gang member. Vice President Vance posted, "This man is an illegal immigrant with no right to be in our country."
It was an administrative error. This individual, who was deported to El Salvador and will not be returning to our country, was a member of the brutal and vicious MS-13 gang.
The Trump administration touts its handling of border security, with illegal border crossings now the lowest ever recorded. A new poll shows 58% of Americans approve of the president's deportation efforts. But an ACLU attorney says mistakes have been made.
Whoever heard of sending someone potentially for a life sentence in El Salvador without giving them any due process to show they don't belong?
We spoke to Rodriguez's mother back in Venezuela, who said her daughter hoped for a better future in the U.S. Now, both women just want to be deported to their own country.
What will you do the moment you see her for the first time?
My God, it is going to be the happiest day of my life, she said. We reached out to the Department of Homeland Security about these two women, and they said that these matters are claimed under privilege and state secrets in ongoing litigation, and they cannot comment at this time.
All right, Julia, thank you so much. Well, developing this morning, China has launched another military drill around Taiwan, the second drill in less than 2 days. NBC's Matt Bodner is following that and other world headlines for us. Hey, Matt, good morning.
Savannah, good morning. We begin this hour with more on that massive surprise Chinese military exercise surrounding Taiwan. These drills involve all branches of China's military, and they are expressly practicing a naval blockade and combined assault on the island. Today, the scale of the exercise escalated, with Chinese forces practicing, quote, joint blockade and control, as well as precision strikes on key targets in a live fire scenario. A spokesperson for China's Eastern Theater Command said the targets simulated, quote, key ports and energy facilities. Moving along now to Serbia, anti-government protesters are alleging that the government deployed illegal sonic weapons to disperse demonstrators in Belgrade on March 15th. Take a look at these videos. You can see demonstrators suddenly rushing to get off of a packed street. One witness described hearing a sudden wave of sound, quote, like some powerful machine hurtling up from behind. Tools like this are illegal in Serbia. The government initially denied possessing them, but they have since admitted to buying such devices from the U.S. in 2021. Serbia has also invited Russia's FSB, which itself has been accused of possessing and deploying devices like this, to help investigate. We'll wrap up this hour right here in the United Kingdom. The Chester Zoo, located in northwestern England, has just opened its brand new Africa facility. Built at a cost of $36 million US, the new facility is 22 acres in size. It is the UK's largest ever zoo installation, built to simulate conditions in Africa. The zoo's manager told The Guardian it was no small task to replicate the African savanna in northern England, where the weather is, quote, slightly different. Back to you.
Very cool, Matt. Thank you so much. Well, coming up, lawmakers hitting the gas on a bill they say is long overdue. When we come back, the latest push to update crash tests to include female dummies. Plus, you've probably heard of intermittent fasting. Well, new research shows just how effective the health trend really is. Your weekly checkup is next here on Morning News Now. We are back with a new push to make cars safer for women. Here in the U.S., get this, there are currently no test dummies used in crash tests that resemble the size of the average American woman. And experts say that's why women have a higher chance of being hurt or even killed in a crash. NBC News Capitol Hill correspondent Julie Sirkin has more on what lawmakers are doing to try to change this.
19-year-old Maria Weston Kuhn never imagined her family vacation would end like this.
We were driving down a winding countryside road, and all of a sudden there was a car in front of us, and it hit us. It just came out of nowhere.
It happened in Maria's home state of Maine over Christmas in 2019. Maria sat in the back of the car with her mom and sister. Her dad was in the driver's seat, her brother in the passenger seat beside him.
Did you and your mom sustain worse injuries than your brother and your dad?
We did, strangely enough. I remember we all thought at the time it's so strange that the people farthest from where the car actually hit were the most hurt.
The only difference is that you and your mom are women and your brother and your dad are men.
The injuries that my mom and I suffered were exactly the ones that are most common for women to suffer in car crashes.
The seatbelt Maria wore pinned her intestines against her spine. But it wasn't until she got home from the hospital that she realized her injuries were part of what experts agree is a troubling pattern.
The seatbelts and airbags are not designed to protect us.
More than 5 years have passed since Maria's accident, and today in the United States there are still no dummies used in car crash tests that represent the average woman's height, weight, and body type.
If you look at a typical crash test dummy,
Chris O'Connor, president and CEO of Humanetics, the world's largest producer of crash test dummies, says this means cars are not designed to ensure the safety of women. His company makes these smart dummies that have 150 sensors, which correspond to every potential injury you could have in a car accident. And there are anatomically accurate versions for men and women.
If you look at the lower legs, has like 50 more sensors than what that would have.
They're built in this century with updated technology. The only problem, these aren't used in the U.S.
The regulation says you only have to use the old standard, which is from 40, 50 years ago. Why are the car companies still using this? Because it's available and it's easy.
And because car companies have little incentive to change their ways, unless mandated by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, or NHTSA for short. This 4'11", 108-pound dummy is a small version of the male dummy, designed in the 1970s. But O'Connor says the sensors are not concentrated in the areas women are most likely to be injured, including in the legs, where according to a study by the Insurance Institute for Highway Safety, women are 2.5 times more likely to be hurt in a crash.
They put a female chest jacket on it and called it a female.
This is a man-sized car.
When safety requirements were first put in place, cars were marketed for men who did most of the driving, but not so today.
There's more licensed women driving than there are men driving.
How many more women die every year than men do?
A woman now, today, in the same conditions, same accident, same belted driver, is 73% more likely to be injured and almost 20% more likely to be killed than a male.
Inspired by Maria's story and the staggering statistics, lawmakers took notice.
This seems like such a no-brainer.
Well, sometimes manufacturers need to be pushed a little bit.
The She Drives Act would require the use of those smart dummies, including the representative female version.
It's a big safety problem, and there's a simple fix, so let's do it.
They are doing it. The legislation could even pass this year.
How does it feel to be the driving force behind action that could save so many women in this country?
It's been quite a journey to get us this far. I had no idea this was an issue. I did not know how much work there was to be done.
Julie Sirkin, NBC News.
Such an important conversation to have. Well, now it's time for our weekly medical checkup. And first up, we're looking at a new study on weight loss that found intermittent fasting could be more effective than simply cutting calories. And we've also got a look at the importance of regular checkups for teenagers, as new research shows addressing heart disease risk factors during adolescence could lower the risk later in life. We have NBC News medical contributor, our friend Dr. Vin Gupta, joining us to discuss these headlines. Hi, Dr. Gupta. Always great to see you. So good morning. Our first study, this is so interesting to me because I've heard so many good things, but then also so many bad things about intermittent fasting. But this one specifically looked at the fact that it's led to more weight loss than just cutting calories. I have heard certain things, so like for women with hormonal changes and stuff, it can put your body under stress. So what do you say about something like this? Does this mean that intermittent fasting is the better approach for weight management? And tell us what people should keep in mind if they're thinking about trying it.
Yeah, well, good morning, Savannah. This is a really critical topic. This study found that intermittent fasting, so say 16 hours where you're really not eating anything, 8 hours where you're really trying to fit in your caloric intake in a day, say for 3 days a week, and then the other 4 days you're eating freely, that results in about 8% weight loss after about a year, 5% with traditional calorie restrictions, just cutting out, a meal or just minimizing your intake. And so really the point here is that, yes, there was a modest effect size towards intermittent fasting. It wasn't huge, but it's something to consider. And so from a doctor's orders perspective, I would advise whether you're doing calorie restriction or intermittent fasting, which is worth the try, you can really rev up your metabolism. Start slowly, stay hydrated, and plan your meals. It's going to avoid things like junk eating or just reflex snacking.
Yeah, whenever I've done intermittent fasting, that stay hydrated is a big one. I'm like chugging water during the fasting period. Dr. Gupta, let's look at this new scientific statement. This is from the American Heart Association, which says that many young people might be missing a crucial opportunity to prevent heart disease. What is that opportunity? What should people know about protecting their heart health? How do you know if you're on the road to heart disease?
Yeah, this is really keying in on the fact that when folks go from adolescence to adulthood, Savannah, they're not making a primary care appointment. They're not getting screened. There's actually data showing that physical activity levels decline after high school. And so high blood pressure, diabetes, obesity really can start to set in, especially in this setting of not getting screened. So here's, from a doctor's orders perspective, things that you can do. Number one, establish healthy eating habits and really establish routines like that annual primary care appointment. Savannah, we're talking about silent killers here that young adults don't realize they may actually start having in their 20s, and it can cascade.
Dr. Gupta, also our phones, of course, a constant source of distraction. This last study, though, it looked at the fact that even when you're not necessarily just looking at your phone, we still find other ways to procrastinate. I'm definitely in this camp. What can we do to stay on task?
Well, the study found that people use phones even 2 more times when it's in reach. That notifications didn't really impact the utilizations of phones, and that if it wasn't within reach, we all found different ways to distract ourselves, say with a laptop or another type of device. So, what can you do? Doctor's orders here to minimize digital use. It's the stuff that you and I have talked about many times before. It's silencing your notifications. It's trying to change your habits. Do not disturb is important at night, especially for good night's sleep, and really trying to lean in if you can. Physical activity without a phone, if you can do that. If you need your music, maybe do it through a different device. But those are the things to really focus on.
Dr. Vin Gupta, thank you very much. Good headlines today. Great to have you. Well, coming up, a real pain at the DMV, where the lines are just getting longer ahead of next month's Real ID deadline. More on the scramble and what happens if you don't get it in time. Plus, new season, new rules for the NFL, the changes you can expect to see on the field. You're watching Morning News Now.
We're back with a reminder about a looming deadline that could disrupt air travel for millions of Americans. If you plan on using your driver's license to catch an upcoming domestic flight, you only have a few more weeks to get your hands on what's known as a Real ID. NBC News correspondent Jesse Kirsch has more on what you need to know. And Jesse, I know the DMV you're at, already busy, right?
Yeah, look at this, Joe. It's just after 7:30 in the morning here in Miami, and we've already got a pretty long line of people. And this is just a reminder of the fact that you need to give yourself time to get this done. How much time do you have left? I'll tell you exactly. This is the Department of Homeland Security's website, and they have it listed at 34 days, 16 hours, 12 minutes, and 1 second. Look at that. The switch over right now to 11 minutes, 59 seconds. Very exciting stuff happening here. All of this with that deadline approaching, and something to keep in mind if you're just now realizing you need a fresh driver's license, be prepared for potential travel hiccups down the road.
From California.
Look at all these people. Look at that. Hello. It's going to be a long day.
To New York City, America's DMVs are packed.
I probably spent 8 or 9 hours trying to get my license.
If you've ever gotten a driver's license, these scenes may not surprise you. But this morning, the waiting game is getting more urgent. Because by May 7th, if your regular old driver's license is not a Real ID, you should not rely on it at TSA checkpoints. When flying domestically, you will be able to use other forms of ID, including your passport. But your driver's license won't cut it unless it has one of these stars up top. Real ID is a federal requirement created after 9/11 to ensure minimum security standards nationwide. The rollout, years in the making, has repeatedly been pushed back, including because of the COVID pandemic. But the federal government says its current May 7th deadline is not budging, even though TSA says it has the flexibility to phase in enforcement. Illinois Secretary of State Alexei Janulius says with demand surging, his office has added 2,500 new daily appointments and created a Real ID supercenter.
We've heard from colleagues in other states where people are sleeping in their cars, sleeping in tents outside of DMVs. We wanted to get in front of that problem.
There are also reports of appointment scalpers grabbing up and selling available appointment slots, which Florida's Miami-Dade County just outlawed. Once you do get in at the DMV, make sure you have the right paperwork showing your full legal name, date of birth, social security number, and lawful status. You'll also need 2 proofs of your address. And the Department of Homeland Security recommends checking with your state's driver's licensing agency to see what else you might need.
If you don't have a flight on May 7th or the following week, maybe you're not flying until this summer, maybe you're not flying over Memorial Day, try to then get an appointment post May 7th.
But if you want to use a real ID for an upcoming domestic flight, the race is on.
Okay, so what do you do if you need a driver's license and you don't have an appointment? A couple things to keep in mind. First of all, you might be able to snag a last-minute appointment if someone cancels, so keep an eye on the system online. You also might be able to walk in like they're letting people do here in Miami because they're trying to get as many people through as they possibly can. So you might be able to show up, but give yourself plenty of time, and you might want to get there early because, again, Joe, take a look at this at around 7:30 in the morning. And lastly, AAA tells us some of their branches actually offer DMV services, so contact your local branch because you might be able to get it done there. And again, if you've got a trip coming up, if you're worried at this point about how you're going to be able to get through security, again, a passport still works. It's just a matter of your driver's license. If you're using that for a domestic flight, you're supposed to be upgrading to a real ID. Joe.
Important reminder there. All right. We wish everyone the best of luck. Jesse, thank you so much.
That is a real yikes. Okay, speaking of your wallet, let's get you some money headlines. Chipotle is reportedly embarking on a treasure hunt for avocados.
CNBC's Savannah Henao has more on this quest and other dollar sign headlines. Savannah, good morning.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Savannah. Good morning to you. So Chipotle is reaching far and wide for avocados as President Trump's tariffs threaten the supply from Mexico, which actually accounts for roughly 90% of U.S. imports. Now, the Wall Street Journal reports the chain has actually spent several years looking for farms in the Americas and Caribbean that can meet the immense demand. Now, Chipotle estimates it bought about 5% of all the avocados consumed in the U.S. last year. Visa is reportedly offering Apple about $100 million to take over the tech giant's credit card partnership from MasterCard. The Wall Street Journal says American Express is also trying to win the Apple Card, looking to become the card's issuer as well as the payment network. Goldman Sachs and Apple launched the card in 2019 with MasterCard as the payment processor, but they've ended the alliance. And Elon Musk remains on top of the Forbes annual billionaires list. The Tesla and SpaceX CEO has an estimated net worth of $342 billion. Forbes calculated the numbers based on stock prices and exchange rates as of March 7th. So it doesn't fully reflect the decline in Tesla stock over the past few weeks. That's partly due to public backlash over Musk's role with the Trump administration. Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg is second with $216 billion, followed by Amazon founder Jeff Bezos at $215 billion. There are now more than 3,000 billionaires worldwide with a combined net worth of $16 trillion, guys.
Ooh.
Okay.
Wow.
Money.
There you go.
Savannah, thank you. Well, the NFL draft is still 3 weeks away. The league season never really seems to end. There's always something to talk about. This morning, we're getting an idea of some of the ways the NFL is shaking up the rules this year.
Yeah, the league is announcing new changes for the upcoming seasons, from the chain gang to your team's favorite alternate uniforms, and there's still the chance for even more changes.
More on the changes coming to the next NFL season. We're joined by staff writer at The Athletic, Charlotte Carroll. Charlotte, good to have you with us. So, among all the things, perhaps the one that ignites the most debate this offseason and all the debate last season, a potential ban on the tush push. The NFL still hasn't made a decision on it, but that's basically two players line up behind the quarterback, push him into the end zone in short yardage situations. The Eagles made it famous on their way to a Super Bowl win. Some teams are good at it, others not so good. What's going on with this?
You got it. You said it exactly right. This is the one that's ignited the most debate down here in West Palm Beach. And anyone you talk to, it's the first thing they bring up. But just because the league tabled it for now, they're going to vote on it in May, does not mean it's over. For fans of the brotherly shove and the potential that it could still be banned. It just might change. The league has brought up health and safety concerns. That's the biggest kind of proponent for changing and going back to some rules from 2004 that prevented kind of pushing or pulling the ball carrier. So kind of looking and changing the way the proposal kind of was brought up. So still plenty to come, and it's not changing.
Another big news here, a new overtime format coming. So now both teams will get to possess the ball during this 10-minute overtime period. Before, sometimes a game was decided without one team even getting a chance to score in OT. Why make the change now?
Yeah, it was a matter of being fair. You've had teams that would not be able to get the ball back and the opportunity to score unless they defended it or unless the opposing team, the receiving team, I should say, that first got the ball was only scored a field goal. So this is a chance for that other team to score and make this more equitable. Chances of ties might be higher, but at least brings the idea that this is fair. And that's something that changed back in 22 after a really big scandal with the Bills not getting the ball back in a playoff game.
Real quick, we only have a few seconds here, but touchbacks now move to the 35-yard line. What kind of impact could that have on games?
Yeah, it's going to have a huge impact in terms of just the strategy. And this is what the dynamic kickoff was intended for. So they're going to hopefully be able to see it actually realized.
And the uniform one is fun. That there could be more combinations and something like that, right? They can live throwbacks. That's what I'm in it for, Charlotte.
That's the fashion. The NFL fashion.
Always about the fashion.
Yeah.
My favorite part, too.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Did you hear that?
All right, coming up, the wonder of blunders. We've all messed up popular phrases or quotes, but have you ever thought about turning those slightly embarrassing flubs into something more fun?
Well, one sales exec, he's been doing just that and getting a lot of attention for it online. His story next on Morning News Now. Finally, this time we've got the story of how one worker's metaphor mix-up started a now viral sensation.
We've all done it, accidentally flubbed a well-known phrase. Well, our Emily Ikeda spoke to one sales exec who turned one of those innocent mistakes into an opportunity to unite colleagues.
When Mike O'Brien retired from Ford.
Okay, that is a serious list. Oh my gosh, wow.
He kept an unusual workplace memento.
This is the board word shrine.
An exhaustive list of every time someone at the office flubbed a phrase.
He's not the smartest knife in the drawer.
More than 2,200 entries over the past decade. Some off by a single word. I heard it through the grapefruit. I don't want to be a dead horse. Too many cooks in the soup. There are also metaphorical mix-ups. A sheep in wolf's clothing. And then just the totally far-fetched, like the slowest elk in the jungle.
What was behind this effort?
What happened was there was multiple fumbles, or as somebody once said, flumble. And so I'm going to write that on the board. And somebody did it the next day, and we did it again, and it just took off.
And no one spared. You'll find O'Brien's name listed more than 100 times, even Ford's CEO.
These little moments within the day of levity, it just brought everybody together.
Since the Wall Street Journal first profiled O'Brien, his list of verbal blunders has gone viral, inspiring book inquiries.
I think it speaks to the relatability factor here.
Yeah, everybody does it.
He's now passed the torch to several co-workers, though in their words, O'Brien is forever unbackfillable. Emily Ikeda, NBC News, Novi, Michigan.
Unbackfillable is funny.
I heard the story once of someone who said that the books were selling like pancakes.
That's good.
She said it on television, too. So there you go.
Oh, my God.
All right, that's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now.
Stay with us, though. The news continues right now. Good morning, and thanks for kicking off your Wednesday with us. I'm Savannah Sellers.
I'm Joe Fryer. Right now on Morning News Now, a whirlwind week in Washington rolls on with more tariff turmoil expected from the White House. Today, President Trump's so-called Liberation Day expected to usher in even more economic uncertainty for Wall Street investors and Main Street consumers. It's all prompting a historic showing of resistance on Capitol Hill from one Senate Democrat.
If someone is willing to violate the Constitution, for some, it endangers the constitutional rights for us all. This is a crisis for us.
More from Senator Cory Booker's record-breaking 25-hour speech as American voters make their voices heard on Mr. Trump's first few months back in the Oval Office. States of emergency, more severe weather on tap for millions from Texas to Michigan. Mother Nature is set to soak the Midwest in the coming days with more than a foot of rain expected in some spots. Our Angie Lastman is tracking it all as we look ahead to your weekend. Plus, a hardline new push from the Justice Department, now seeking the death penalty for accused CEO killer Luigi Mangione. But is that easier said than done? We're digging into what comes next in a trial that is dividing America. And this morning, we are saying goodbye to Val Kilmer, his decades-long career in Hollywood, bolstered by standout performances in films like Top Gun and Batman Forever. I'll bring you a look back at his storied and sometimes tumultuous life behind the scenes as we remember a legend of the big screen, who, by the way, said that he didn't really want the part in Top Gun initially. I think it turned out well for him that he took that part.
I love a story like that.
Exactly. I know.
Yeah.
We'll remember in a little bit. Let's begin this morning with the global economy, bracing for a new set of U.S. tariffs, which will be unveiled by President Trump later today. The White House says the measures are meant to boost U.S. manufacturing and rectify alleged unfair trading practices.
But the tariffs are expected to spark global retaliation and intensify a trade war that could have a major impact on the world economy and on financial markets. NBC News Chief White House correspondent Peter Alexander has the details.
Good day to you. Even now, just hours before the president's Rose Garden announcement this afternoon, what exactly those new tariffs will look like remains a mystery. The White House says the president and his team are, in their words, perfecting the policy. But with today's planned unveiling comes plenty of uncertainty. The S&P 500 just tallying its worst quarter in 3 years as Americans brace for what it'll do to the prices you pay.
This morning, President Trump going all in on his huge economic gamble, preparing to slap reciprocal tariffs on foreign adversaries and allies alike.
They've been ripping us off for years, right from the beginning, and I think this is going to be an amazing...
When pressed whether it could be the wrong strategy, the White House is expressing confidence.
They're not going to be wrong. It is going to work.
The president has already implemented a series of new tariffs or import taxes. 20% on Chinese imports, 25% on aluminum and steel, and 25% on certain goods from Mexico and Canada. Beginning tomorrow, he'll impose 25% tariffs on imported vehicles and next month on imported auto parts. For a president who promised to bring prices down on day one, the tariffs are already raising them on everything from wedding dresses.
When the prices go up it goes up for everyone.
To car repairs.
We're seeing fewer customers, and those customers that we're seeing, they're having higher bills.
Still, many auto workers say the cost is worth it.
Trump is putting these tariffs in place to be able to keep the American people working.
It comes as the president is ramping up his cuts to the federal workforce, about 10,000 jobs slashed across the Department of Health and Human Services, which includes the CDC, FDA, the National Institutes of Health, and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services. Critics warn the cuts could be a blow to public health, medicine, and research in the U.S. Among those protesting President Trump's sweeping actions, Democrat Cory Booker.
More Americans need to stand up and say enough is enough.
Setting the record for the longest speech in Senate history, more than 24 hours, railing against President Trump as a grave and urgent threat to the country.
This president is wrong. And he's violating principles that we hold dear.
Booker's historic speech broke the previous record held by segregationist Strom Thurmond, who was trying to block the passage of a civil rights bill. That was nearly 70 years ago, which Booker said overnight was part of his motivation to keep going. Back to you.
Peter, thank you so much. Let's get more on these tariffs with NBC News senior business correspondent Christine Romans and Investopedia editor-in-chief Caleb Silver. Good morning to both of you. Do we have any idea, Christine, size, scope, scale, anything? I mean, what are we bracing for today?
I mean, it could be anything. It could be the biggest 15 trade deficits. Maybe they just look at those 15. It could be just across the board, a universal tariff on everybody. It could be up to 2 million individual reciprocal tariffs. I mean, these are kind of the range of choices, and they've been going over the details and trying to decide now for many days. The president yesterday said they've got a decision and that they will announce it today at 4 o'clock. And the president's press secretary is saying it will be effective immediately. So that's what we're waiting for.
And Caleb, let's bring you in here. The White House adamant that this will boost the economy. doesn't seem to be a theory that everyone necessarily agrees with. Tell us what economists are saying, and if the operating theory is that the economy is strong enough to handle a trade war.
Well, it was strong enough, but we've seen it weakening over the past quarter because of the fear of tariffs, but also persistent inflation. So the tariffs, all these tariffs go into place, or even some of them, we're talking about a slowdown in growth. That slowdown comes from consumers pulling back spending and businesses pulling back spending. We've already started to see that in the past few weeks. If this continues, that leads into a bigger slowdown, a potential recession down the line. It's all about what tariffs are implemented, how long they last, and the scope.
Something we do know, Christine, is these tariffs on auto imports expected to kick in tomorrow. What's going to be the impact on the car market?
So we've already been talking to dealers who say they're getting notices from the automakers saying they can't guarantee pricing for after tomorrow or after the next couple of weeks. So I think you can expect prices will rise. The president wants these companies, these car companies, just make it all in the U.S. Just make it all in the U.S. so you don't have a tariff. These are far-flung, complicated supply chains. Even when you talk to automakers who agree that there could be more production in the United States and there could be more UAW jobs in the United States, they point out that the reason why these cars are affordable for Americans is because of those supply chains that really are super efficient and productive and cross these, North American borders. So you're talking about higher prices. One thing I think is really interesting, if you get prices so high because of these tariffs on cars, then you're going to have factories running fewer shifts. You could actually hurt the auto workers that the president is trying to support here. So it's a really delicate game and a really big gamble from the White House.
What's the advice, Caleb, for the American consumer?
Well, we don't know what tariffs are going to be in place, but I wouldn't be stockpiling anything right now, maybe except for tequila. We know things that are going to get taxed from Canada.
That's always a good tip, though.
But not avocados by no means. But we still don't know what it is. And I would see how these price increases play out if retailers have to pass them on to us. There is a breaking point in which we just stop buying and they can't raise prices anymore. Let this play out. If you need to make a big purchase right now, do it, obviously. But you can also wait and see what happens. The electronics, they're going to get hit the hardest first, along with the cars that we just talked about.
Don't go into debt to buy something.
No.
I think you do. I mean, you had a really good thing. We were talking in the break. You had to really focus on needs.
Yeah, focus on what you need, not what you want right now. Make sure you have that savings cushioned away. You don't know what's going to happen with the economy.
That's great.
That's really good advice, yeah.
All right, Christine, Caleb, thank you both. Appreciate it.
Well, in the first major battleground state election of President Trump's second term, Democrats have come out on top. NBC News projects Susan Crawford has won a seat on the Wisconsin Supreme Court. The win maintains Democrats' narrow majority in that state's highest court. This race, along with wins by Republicans in two special congressional races in Florida, were seen by some as a referendum on President Trump and also on his advisor, Elon Musk. NBC News Chief Capitol Hill correspondent Ryan Nobles joins us from Washington with more on the results. Hey, Ryan, good morning.
Hey, Savannah, good morning. And you're right. Democrats did hold on to that slim majority in Wisconsin State Supreme Court. And that really is a setback for Trump ally Elon Musk, who campaigned there. He spent millions of dollars as well. But over in Florida, the GOP maintained control of two critical open House seats, giving Speaker Mike Johnson just a little extra breathing room, with Republicans holding on to that razor-thin majority.
Overnight, voters in Wisconsin and Florida sending two different messages to the nation's capital.
All right, Wisconsin, we did it.
Susan Crawford winning the Wisconsin Supreme Court race against Brad Schimmel, the GOP-backed candidate supported by President Trump and his top ally, Elon Musk. Crawford's victory preserving a liberal majority on the battleground state's high court, and is a blow for Musk, who invested millions in the race and traveled to Wisconsin attempting to energize voters. The billionaire even giving away million-dollar checks to people who signed his petition opposing what he calls activist judges.
As a little girl growing up in Chippewa Falls, I never could have imagined that I'd be taking on the richest man in the world.
But GOP candidates coming out on top across the country in Florida, in special elections for two congressional seats vacated by Republicans Matt Gaetz and National Security Advisor Michael Waltz. Republicans Randy Fine and Jimmy Patronis both won victories in ruby red districts. The margins of victories less than half of what President Trump won back in November, though turnout for special elections is traditionally lower.
Thank you to President Trump.
Securing those seats was critical for Republicans, given their slim majority in the House. Overnight, Trump celebrating Fine's victory on social media, while Fine giving him credit. Because of you, Mr. President, I won't let you down. Democrats and Republicans vowing to continue fighting in the traditionally conservative regions.
It's not the end, it's a beginning for future races here.
This election is a reminder that the Florida Panhandle will forever be red and it'll be forever Trump country.
Now, Democrats winning in Wisconsin and Republicans winning in Florida may not seem too shocking, but there's a lot of nuance among these election results that could shape the political strategies for future candidates on both sides of the aisle going forward. Savannah?
All right, Ryan, thanks.
Severe weather is causing big problems across the Midwest and South this morning. Intense storms are bringing tornadoes, golf ball-sized hail, and damaging winds. In Floyd County, Kentucky, a Board of Education office was damaged by powerful gusts. Wild weather hit a FEMA office that was helping recent flood victims there. The threat is far from over. More dangerous weather is expected later today, with more than 70 million people at risk, from Texas all the way up to Michigan.
For more on the possible flood risks and these severe storms, let's get a look at your Morning News Now weather.
Meteorologist Angie Lastman joins us now with the forecast. Angie, good morning.
Hi, guys. Good morning. We've got a multi-impact, multi-day kind of situation unfolding with a whole lot of severe weather possible and the potential for some life-threatening flooding. So starting first with the severe weather that's already ramped up this morning, this line of thunderstorms slowly but surely working across parts of the midsection of the country. And no surprise, we've got all the ingredients there to see some tornadoes and some of those strong storms develop. So tornado watch it is till noon Central Time for places like Arkansas. We have got parts of Oklahoma, Kansas, Missouri included in there. Kansas City is included, as well as Springfield. And again, that's going to go until noontime. But even as we get into the afternoon hours and through tonight, we've got a large section of the country that has, once again, all those ingredients there to see some severe storms popping up. Now, that does mean that 72 million people from the Great Lakes down to the south are included in it. But notice where that high risk is: Paducah to Memphis, but even Little Rock, Nashville, Lexington, Indianapolis, St. Louis, up into Chicago, all included in this. We're most concerned about those strong, long-lived, long-track, large tornadoes developing here as we get into the later parts of today. Indianapolis stretching down to El Dorado, that's the chances for us to see those EF2 or higher. That's where you'll see the greatest chance of that. But again, expanding across this region, the tornado risk will be very real through the afternoon and evening hours tonight, on top of the potential for, of course, the hail and those strong wind gusts. And that severe risk is going to last over the next couple of days as well, as that system kind of gets stuck and leaves us with some unsettled weather. Now, we've got overlapping risks. So I mentioned the high risk of severe weather, but notice the high risk of flooding. And they're kind of essentially centered right on top of each other. Hopkinsville, Jonesboro, Dyersburg, all included in that high risk of flooding. But you can see this same region, essentially Arkansas up into Kentucky, up into southern portions of Illinois, and parts of Tennessee, all included in that. So we've got this multi-impact kind of thing unfolding over a prolonged period. Here's what's going to happen with that moisture, because this, I think, is going to be the most significant thing that we see here as we get through the next couple of days. We'll have the potential to see some of those tornadoes, and that means EF3s and EF4s. But then beyond that, we've got multiple days where we could see impressive kind of amounts of really heavy rain happening over the same spot. And we've really got this pattern stuck with us. That storm track is going to get stuck in the same position all the way through the weekend. So this is the significant flooding danger that we're concerned about, where some of these spots where you see the red, upwards of 7 inches of rain. Those aren't going to be even the highest amounts that we could see. We could potentially see over a foot of rain in some spots, upwards of 15 inches over the next 4 days. And in one of those days, maybe 4 or 5 inches in some of these locations. So this is why we're likely going to see, we will see, I should say, these flood alerts stay with us through at least Sunday. We've got over 30 million people included in those right now. Those are going to stick with us. And the flash flood risk is going to stick with us, too. Here's a look at where it is today, specifically where you see that bright pink: Evansville to Little Rock, Memphis, Paducah, even Nashville, all included in that. And this is our concern for those rainfall amounts. But again, as we get into Sunday, guys, we don't see this pattern letting up. So not only will we have to deal with multiple days of heavy rain and the concern for life-threatening flash flooding, but we'll also see that severe risk be something that we deal with through the next few days as well. Busy, busy.
Yeah.
For sure. Angie, thank you so much.
Accused killer Luigi Mangione is now facing the federal death penalty if convicted for the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi says she directed federal prosecutors to seek the death penalty as part of President Trump's agenda to, quote, make America safe again. But support for the 26-year-old appears to be holding steady as donations poured in for his legal defense fund. NBC News senior legal correspondent Laura Jarrett has the latest.
Hey there, a significant move here by prosecutors, Guy. The DOJ now choosing one of the most high-profile criminal cases to potentially be the first use of capital punishment in years if Mangione were actually convicted. But it's a move not without its challenges.
Accused killer Luigi Mangione facing new legal jeopardy this morning. The Justice Department announcing it will seek the death penalty against him for the murder of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson. The Attorney General calling it a premeditated, cold-blooded assassination that shocked America.
Thanks to President Trump's directive, we are seeking the death penalty again.
Mangione remains behind bars after his arrest, pleading not guilty as he now faces a litany of charges. Accused of shooting Thompson as he walked to a hotel in Midtown Manhattan, prompting a nationwide manhunt last year.
He is being prosecuted in 3 jurisdictions.
Mangione's legal team calling the new move for capital punishment barbaric and political, accusing prosecutors of defending a, quote, broken and immoral healthcare industry that continues to terrorize the American people. That tone frequently echoed by Mangione's supporters online.
Our king is going to die. What?
As donations to the 26-year-old's legal fund continue to pour in, now over $800,000.
We, the people, want Luigi free!
Some even recently attempting to send Mangione heart-shaped notes of support. According to court documents, 2 letters were found in a pair of Argyle socks given to him ahead of a court appearance in February. One addressed to Mangione saying, "Know there are thousands of people wishing you luck." The defense says they were inadvertently included.
For now, both sides are expected back in court on April 18th. Back to you guys.
Laura, thank you.
For more on this, let's bring in NBC News legal analyst Danny Ceballos. Danny, good morning. So just how rare is it for the federal government to seek the death penalty?
So rare that statistically it could be said that it doesn't even happen. And by that I mean in the modern era, since 1976, and the federal death penalty wasn't reinstated till 88, 16 people have been executed, with a lot of them coming really within 6 months in about 2020. And the last execution, I believe, was 2021. That's several years ago. But here's the thing. That conviction was for crimes dating back to 1996. So here's the summary. The federal death penalty virtually never happens. And when it does, the execution is carried out usually decades after the crime of conviction, where a lot of people don't remember that crime or weren't even alive at the time. So statistically, virtually insignificant. Certainly significant for the defendant, but as far as deaths go in the United States and killings by firearm, which number in the 20,000, then statistically, this is not a significant number.
How challenging is this going to be for federal prosecutors? I mean, what are some of the factors or standards they need to meet to seek the death penalty?
So this is really interesting. Of the 16 executions since 1976, none of them that I could find involved this particular death penalty eligible statute. Now, he's charged with, I'll call it 924G, but it's basically murder with the use of a firearm. Now, you may say, well, why is that even a federal crime? That's usually a state crime. Well, firearms give the federal government that jurisdictional hook. It's a kind of interstate commerce hook that allows them to prosecute. But the point is, they very rarely prosecute that crime as a capital crime. And in fact, like I said, I can't find an instance where someone was put to death as a result of this particular statute, murder with a firearm. So it's something that the federal government doesn't charge very often. And because capital crimes in the federal system are something that the federal government gets to cherry pick. They get to look around and say, who's the worst person we can find? And if you look at the history of federal capital punishment, it's all the worst human beings you can find. It's not everyone they could charge. It's just the worst of the worst and the headline grabbers.
Danny, what's next in this case?
Well, federal death penalty crimes require, it's going to take longer to get this to trial. You're going to have a death penalty eligible jury, because in the federal system, the jury not only decides guilt, but in capital crimes, they also decide punishment. So what happens is lawyers who handle these cases are really specialists in what we call mitigation. In a way, the liability part, the guilt, usually this is someone who's going to be found guilty. The real phase of the trial is putting on a mitigating case to show a jury, demonstrate to them that there's something worth saving in a defendant that usually doesn't, at least objectively, have a lot worth saving.
Danny Ceballos, thank you.
Today, Hollywood is mourning the loss of one of its most versatile actors, Val Kilmer, one of the top-paid stars of the 90s. He was best known for blockbusters like Top Gun early in his career and Batman Forever. A wide-ranging leading man who earned critical praise, Kilmer was seen as captivating but also unpredictable sometimes. Here's a look back at his life on and off the silver screen.
You figured it out yet? What's that? Who's the best pilot?
This morning, Hollywood is remembering a cool, charismatic, and confident on-screen star.
You can be my wingman anytime.
Val Kilmer, who took on iconic roles from Iceman to Batman.
It's the car, right? Chicks love the car.
He passed away at the age of 65, his daughter says, from pneumonia. Actor Josh Brolin summed up the star's on-screen persona in a tribute, writing, "You were a smart, challenging, brave, uber-creative firecracker. There's not a lot left of those." Born in Los Angeles in 1959, Kilmer became one of the youngest students admitted to the Juilliard School's acting program. His early roles were in comedies, Top Secret and Real Genius. But his big break came in 1986's Top Gun, where he starred as cocky naval pilot Iceman opposite Tom Cruise.
What's your problem, Kazansky? You're everyone's problem. That's because every time you go up in the air, you're unsafe.
He cemented his leading man status playing legendary rocker Jim Morrison in the Oliver Stone-directed The Doors.
I'm the poet and you're my muse.
Following it up with a star-making run of 90s movies, including Tombstone.
That's the rumor.
And Heat, starring opposite Robert De Niro and Al Pacino. In 1995, Kilmer took on his biggest role yet, the Caped Crusader in Batman Forever.
If Bruce Wayne could have given his life for your family, he would have.
The movie was a hit, though Kilmer did not play Batman again. The method actor famously going to great lengths for his roles. In 1996, talking about his bad boy image on Today.
Michael Douglas helped me to understand, although it's kind of saddening, but he said really it's a compliment if you get... they don't write about people they're not interested in.
He faced health struggles in later years, diagnosed with throat cancer in 2014. Though he recovered after several operations, his voice was never the same. In 2021, he reflected on his career in the documentary Val.
I tried to hear the world I want to survive.
Kilmer had forged on, staying in the Hollywood mix. His most memorable later role came alongside an old friend.
Who's the better pilot, you or me?
Top Gun Maverick would be Kilmer's last appearance on screen. Perhaps the most famous line Kilmer ever delivered was from Tombstone when he said, "I'm your huckleberry." That was actually the title of his memoir. In it, he admitted he did not initially want the role of Iceman in Top Gun, saying he didn't really care about the film and felt more deflated than inflated when he got the part. Obviously, in the end, it worked out well for him, and the fact that he even appeared in Maverick years later shows he was probably pretty comfortable with the part.
He ultimately was happy about it. Gosh, it's so crazy how stuff like that almost happens.
I know. It's all those little decisions that are made make or break a career.
Absolutely. What a great look back. Well, there's more to come on this hour of Morning News Now. A little later, we'll dig into how AI has helped one dad learn more about his son's rare disorder while boosting scientists' hunt for a potential cure.
First, after the break, Prince Harry stepping away from the charity he co-founded in his mother's memory. The leadership fight that's now putting the royal family back in the headlines. Those stories and more next. Welcome back. Prince Harry is cutting ties with the charity he co-founded in his mother's memory. This follows a leadership dispute that led to a number of resignations and allegations of wrongdoing. NBC News International correspondent Raf Sanchez is outside Buckingham Palace with all the details. Raf, good morning.
Joe, good morning. Prince Harry founded this charity back in 2006. It was his way of honoring the legacy of his mother, Princess Diana, but also showing the world that he had grown up after pretty rambunctious teenage years when he was often in the tabloids. So this charity very close to the prince's heart, but right now it is engulfed in chaos.
It was the charity Prince Harry founded in memory of his mother, Diana. She harnessed her royal star power to comfort children with AIDS and clear a path through deadly minefields. her youngest son following in her footsteps, for nearly 20 years supporting young people in southern Africa with his charity, Sentabale.
I wanted to carry on as best I could what she started.
But now that charity is in meltdown. Harry resigned from Sentabale last week, along with several trustees, saying their relationship with the chair of the board broke down beyond repair. The chair, Sophie Chandauka, hitting back in an interview with Sky News.
What Prince Harry wanted to do was to eject me from the organization. It went on for months through bullying, harassment.
Alleging relations with the prince collapsed after this charity polo match in Miami last year, where she says organizers were caught off guard when Harry's wife Meghan arrived unannounced, accompanied by tennis superstar Serena Williams, leading to this awkward moment.
And so the choreography went badly on stage because we had too many people on stage.
After media criticism, she says Harry asked her to make a statement supporting the Duchess, which she refused to do. An ugly public argument overshadowing a royal legacy of help for the neediest.
And we asked Harry and Meghan's office about those allegations of bullying, about that incident at the polo match. They did not respond on the record, but a source close to Harry and the trustees who resigned said that this was, quote, a publicity stunt by the board chair. They say they are confident they are acting in the best interests of the charity. And Joe, we are now hearing that the charity regulator here in the UK is looking into this case. Joe.
All right. Raph, thank you so much.
Well, this morning, Russia's largest military draft in years is underway despite talks to end the war in Ukraine.
NBC's Matt Bodner has that and other world news. Matt, good morning.
Joe, Savannah, good morning. It's springtime in Russia, which means it's time for new conscripts. President Putin this week signed off calling up 160,000 men aged 18 to 30. This is the largest conscription pool since 2011, and it suggests that Putin is looking to further expand his military regardless of what comes of the war in Ukraine. Officially, legally, Putin cannot send conscripts of this type into combat in foreign states, though there is evidence going back to the start of the war that this is a technicality that can be disregarded or distorted to bolster frontline positions. Putin has called for the size of Russia's armed forces to increase to almost 1.5 million servicemen in the coming years. Moving along now to Myanmar in the ongoing aftermath of that devastating quake last week, buildings across the country damaged by the initial event and ongoing aftershocks continue to collapse. That is further complicating an already difficult situation for rescue workers still trying to find survivors in existing rubble. The official death toll now stands at 2,900 people, with thousands more injured and hundreds still missing. The death toll, therefore, is expected to rise still. And we'll wrap up this hour right here in the UK. The government today has launched a new electronic travel permit system for European visitors. This is similar to the US ESTA system, which you may have heard complaints about from your foreign friends and family. The UK's electronic travel authorization is purchasable online for about $13 US. The price will rise later this month to around $20. It allows visitors to stay for 6 months at a time, and it's valid for 2 years. Americans have been subject to these rules since January. Back to you guys.
All right, Matt, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Coming up, AI for good.
After the break, how one dad is using the power of artificial intelligence to study up on his son's rare neurological disorder, even helping put a group of scientists on the path to a potential cure. Stay with us, that's next. We are back with an inspiring story about a dad who refused to accept that there was nothing he could do to help his son, who was diagnosed with a rare neurological disorder.
Now, thanks to the use of artificial intelligence, he's found a way to connect with researchers and potentially change the future for his little boy. NBC News Now anchor Kate Snow sat down with the family to hear their incredible journey. She joins us now. Kate, good morning.
Good morning, Joe, Savannah. This is a story really about AI being used for good. When their son Max was just about 7 months old, Thomas Wagner and his wife Stephanie found out that he has a debilitating genetic disease. Thomas has no science background. He works as a marketing manager at YouTube, but he knew that he had to do something to try to help his son. So he used AI to communicate with scientists directly, and that just might make medical breakthroughs possible.
Wow. Thomas Wagner and Stephanie Holzhuber always dreamed of becoming parents. Their 2-year-old Max arrived in 2022. He seemed perfectly healthy until one night when Max was 7 months old.
Stephanie was in panic and goes like, Thomas, I think Max has a seizure. Max was really lying on his side and he clearly looked like he was having a seizure.
For weeks, he kept having seizures, and after genetic testing, a doctor told them Max had Alexander disease, and then said this.
At the moment, there is no treatment, no cure, and life expectancy is 5 to 10 years.
That's devastating.
Yeah.
Alexander disease is a rare genetic disorder affecting less than 1 in a million kids that progressively damages the nervous system.
This whole notion of there's nothing you can do, that's not right. There's always something you can do.
Thomas immediately started Googling.
What is Alexander disease? It's all these words that I just did not understand. Like Alexander disease is caused by a mutation of the GFAP gene in astrocytes. And you're
I don't even understand what you're saying.
Since he works for YouTube, owned by Google, Thomas was familiar with Gemini and realized the AI chatbot could help him understand complicated research.
I can upload a paper or a scientific article and I can go, hey, Gemini, can you explain this to me like at high school biology level? And so it translates these complex things into much more simpler explanations.
The AI could also compare scientific papers and find possible connections to his son's disorder.
They've identified these things and they look promising, like could that lead somewhere? Then I asked Gemini, can you help me draft an email to the author of this paper asking effectively if there might be an opportunity to explore this in Alexander disease.
I think he was super excited how quickly they actually responded.
One of his emails was to Dr. Pranam Chatterjee, an assistant professor at Duke.
Had you ever heard of Alexander disease?
No, I did not.
Pranam's lab looks for proteins that cause diseases. Using computer algorithms, their goal is to design drugs to wipe out those proteins. From what the AI told him, Thomas thought this lab could possibly create a drug for Alexander disease.
I thought I was talking to a scientist. He's like, this is a disease, my son has it, this is how it works. I think your technology can solve it.
Thomas helped raise funds, and Pranam's lab is now working to find a treatment.
I will spend the rest of my career doing this if it takes that long. We will find a cure.
In February, they met for the first time at a conference in Philadelphia.
There's no chance he would have been at that conference working on Alexander disease if I hadn't sent him that email. That's why I keep sending folks emails.
And it's because of Max, right?
For sure. You want to go inside?
Thomas and Stephanie say in a lot of ways, Max is just like any other toddler, a happy and curious boy with a big personality.
We sometimes say he's the mayor because wherever we go, he needs to wave at everyone and greet everyone, and he just loves people.
He enjoys playing, making music, being with others.
Because of Thomas, there are now 10 different research groups working to help kids like Max.
It feels like medicine sometimes happens in silos.
Correct.
Like people at one place don't know what the other place is doing.
It's not the easiest to make those connections, but Thomas did that.
After everything that Thomas has done, how are you feeling?
I'm less scared of the future.
I'm not a scientist, I'm not a doctor, I'm just a dad. Gemini has made me a dad that understands Alexander disease a little bit better, but I am really still just a dad who's trying to do the little I can do to make a difference.
Thomas is still in touch with dozens of different scientists. He does a lot of emailing, he told me, at night when Max is asleep, right? Not all the scientists have started working on Alexander disease, guys, but he says he is not giving up. He has become so good at this, he even heard back from a Nobel Prize-winning scientist. I mean, he said to me, he's like, you just got to try, right? Yeah, you just got to, like, throw it out into the wind, send all those emails and see if someone can help.
And also, of course, this was sparked by their own son, Max, but it's got to be helping others.
Yeah, their whole idea is to help, especially other families with Alexander disease in their kids, because they don't want other families to hear that there's nothing we can do. They actually are working with a couple of things. They're on the board. Thomas is on the board of the End AXD, or End Alexander Disease Foundation, and then they started their own foundation now as a couple called Join Team Max, if people want to know more.
Wow, just incredible. What a good use of AI, as you said.
We do so many negative stories.
And
we like this.
Very cool. Kate, thank you. Coming up, we are once again flipping the script.
Yeah, after the break, we're going to bring you a candid conversation with the one and only Peppermint. She's a drag race superstar who broke barriers as the first openly trans woman to compete on the show. Now she's bringing her powerhouse personality back to Netflix with season 2 of Survival of the Thickest. We're talking TV, Broadway, and giving a voice to the often voiceless in America. That's next on Morning News Now. We're back now with our series Flipping the Script, featuring people on screen, on stage, and behind the scenes, shining a spotlight on diversity. Enter Peppermint. She's an actress, singer, and drag queen who is a staple of New York nightlife. Peppermint broke barriers as the first openly trans woman to compete in RuPaul's Drag Race back in season 9. She would then go on to be the first openly trans woman to originate a main role on Broadway, playing the non-binary oracle, but Pythia, in 2018's Head Over Heels. Now Peppermint is in the new hit Netflix series, not new, season 2, Survival of the Thickest, playing a New York City drag performer who just happens to have the name Peppermint. How did that happen?
I have no idea.
Good thing you got that role, right?
Oh my gosh, when I auditioned, I was like, it's called Peppermint. What if I don't get it?
Someone else plays Peppermint.
Oh,
so
gosh.
It is so good to have you with us.
Great to see you.
Let's start with Survival of the Thickest. So we're getting into a little bit of spoiler territory right now, but let's just say you are in your wedding era in this show. We've got a little bit of a clip. Let's play it for you here.
And I so look forward to growing old with you, because I know that it's an opportunity that so many of our trans sisters just don't get.
A powerful moment there. What does this role and having this wedding mean to you, especially when it comes to representation?
I mean, being on a television show is a dream come true. I trained as an actor, and so it's a huge accomplishment personally, but getting a chance to portray someone who is so closely aligns with who I am as a drag entertainer, but also as a trans woman, allows for greater representation. And that is, the 6-year-old version of myself is just doing cartwheels and jumping jacks.
Michelle Buteau, the creator of the show, this was important to her, right?
Absolutely. She came to me between the 2 seasons and said, we really want to show, we want to give you a love interest. We want to show, that trans people are deserving of love. And we want to give you a wedding. And she said, we want to do it right. And they did.
That's important, right? I want to do it right.
Absolutely.
Because sometimes things, they don't get it right.
Well, usually they don't. Especially when it comes to trans representation. There are a lot of people that kind of want to sort of perfunctorily check a box, but it's so much more than that.
Let's talk about where things, I guess, started, at least when it came to your superstardom, which is RuPaul. And to have that opportunity to be the first openly trans performer on RuPaul, what did that mean? And not just for you, but for so many other performers who came after you.
I was coming off of a time at Drag Race where things were not as trans-friendly on the show as they are now. There was a lot of unknowns, and so I was scared out of my wits to be out as a trans woman, because I just wasn't sure how the rest of the cast, the production, would receive it. But they welcomed me with open arms, and it was life-changing. I'm really grateful for having had the opportunity.
That representation is so key, and many people in life maybe don't know a trans person in person.
Most don't.
Television is where they're introduced. So I think of Traitors, which was a show so many people saw and was such a chance for you. And then you were eliminated in the first episode. How hard was that? Did it feel, I don't want to say a missed opportunity, but what did it feel like?
Second episode.
Yes.
But first person eliminated.
Yes.
And it was, I think it was a missed opportunity, but I don't view it as a missed opportunity for myself, more for the show, because I really do think, and we filmed it 2 years ago now, my season, which obviously aired last year, and the chance to have a trans person just in the mix, competing and doing the same things that everybody else does, was a missed opportunity for the show. I think being able to show, and honestly, a missed opportunity for a lot of the viewers, not necessarily people who are fans of, a drag queen or anything like that, but just being able to see how trans people actually can relate with everyone else, which is something that, like you said, most people don't even personally know someone who's trans, and they definitely don't usually get a chance to see someone trans interacting with other people.
Yeah.
And I think that's important.
We have just 5 seconds left here. What's bringing you joy right now? What makes you happy?
The resilience of the trans community.
There you go. Peppermint, it is such a pleasure to meet you. Thank you so much for coming in early this morning to speak with us.
My pleasure.
We really do appreciate it. All right, Savannah.
All right, what a great interview. Let's get to what's making some money headlines this morning. Walmart is making some tough decisions as even more tariffs from the White House loom. CNBC's Savannah now has that in other mini news. Hey, Savannah.
Hey, Savannah. Good morning to you. Yes, so Walmart continues to pressure Chinese suppliers to cut prices by as much as 10%, and that's to offset the impact of President Trump's tariffs. Bloomberg reports that's even after the government summoned executives last month to discuss the issue. A Walmart spokesperson says the discussions are aimed at, well, offering low prices, and it will work closely with suppliers to find the best way forward. Zelle is shutting down its standalone app today, but the move may not really have that big of an impact. More than 150 million customers in the U.S. use Zelle for person-to-person payments, but only about 2% of transactions take place through Zelle's app. Most consumers end up accessing Zelle through their bank, which then allows them to send money to the contact list in their phone. And Nintendo is set to reveal the pricing and launch date for the Switch 2 console today. Analysts expect a smooth transition to the new device, with Nintendo offering upgraded hardware while sticking closely to the design of the original Switch, which has sold more than 150 million units worldwide. Now, the Switch 2 is expected to retail for between $399 and $499 and launch in May or June, so just in time for summer birthdays.
That's going to be popular.
Yeah,
all right.
yeah, real.
Thanks,
Savannah.
Coming up, the embodiment of the American dream landing right here at 30 Rock. We're going to bring you the amazing story of one of our colleagues here at NBC News. An inspiring journey from war-torn Vietnam back in the 70s to becoming a network news correspondent and anchor here in America.
It's Vicky Nguyen. She joins us next with a fascinating look back on her road to success paved by her parents. It is all in her new book, Boat Baby. It's out now. Stay with us. We'll be right back. We are back with the inspiring story of two immigrant parents determined to give their daughter a better life. That daughter is our very own NBC colleague, Vicky Nguyen. She came to the U.S. at just 8 months old. Back in 1979, her parents wrapped her in a towel, boarded a boat, and fled war-torn Vietnam for California. NBC's Tom Yama sat down with Vicky to talk about her family's story, which she shares in her brand new memoir, Boat Baby.
In 1975, Saigon falls and the scramble is on to get out. For the Nguyen family living in South Vietnam, there's no escaping the war.
My dad recalled to me joining the war effort. My dad's older brother, Hong, went missing in action.
3 years later, refusing to live under communism, Huy Nguyen and his wife, Linh Do, know they need to flee to the U.S. But now they have a baby, and the journey to freedom will not be guaranteed. That baby, our very own Vicky Nguyen.
Do you ever think back on your parents when you were just a baby, leaving their country, crossing an ocean?
So to have an 8-month-old baby and think, we are going to wrap our baby in a towel, we are going to smuggle ourselves out through a jungle and hope that we can get onto a fishing boat and cross an ocean to safety, to a refugee camp. I feel like you only make that decision if you are desperate and hopeful.
That trip, the new life the Nguyens found in America, and how a refugee toddler grew up to be a network correspondent and anchor is the basis for Vicky's new memoir, Boat Baby.
I look back and I think about all of the things my parents survived, all of the things they went through, and their attitude was always never complain, never explain, focus on what you can control, keep moving forward, and a lot of that rubbed off on me.
But early on, the family learned that life in America would not be a fairy tale.
My Uncle Tam was at a party and gathering, got into an argument with someone, and was stabbed to death. And that devastated my mother.
The Nguyens would carry on in their new country. Vicky growing up in the Bay Area. Her prom date would later become her husband, and she would build a lasting career in news, but with obstacles.
People would, drive by and be like, hey, it's Connie Chung. It indicated to me that representation matters and that there's still a long way to go.
Despite it all, she calls herself a proud American, an immigrant who is living the American dream.
Can you believe this is your story?
This is a dream that was too big for my family to have, for me to have, and yet it's coming true every single day.
Tom Yamas, NBC News.
Okay, now we have Vicky live with us this morning.
It's
Hi.
so good to be with you.
It's
Thank you for coming to my book event last night.
Oh my God, of course, I wouldn't miss it for the
You were
world.
up late.
And I feel so lucky to have been an early reader.
Yes.
I read this, I was trying to think this morning, I guess it was last October, because I remember a trip that I was on and I was reading it.
Yes.
And just talking to you about it through then. And I want to pick up on a couple things that Tom mentioned, but just give people some more detail, because harrowing really is the word to describe your parents' journey to America. Like literally pirates included. Tell us a little bit about that journey that you and what is it, 2 million Vietnamese people made over the course of this time.
Yeah, between 1975 and 1992, about 2 million people fled Vietnam. And that is why they were called boat people, because most of us had to get out on a boat. I was too young to remember it, but hearing my parents recount the details of leaving in the cover of darkness, of wearing a certain kind of tattered clothing that would just help them blend in with the village that they were going to. They had to get on a sampan first and try to get to the bigger fishing boat. And initially they were stopped by police, but thankfully they were able to pay them off with bribes, went on their way, and then eventually took 2 days and 2 nights to cross the South China Sea. And I will say the pirate encounter, you know, growing up, they don't talk a lot about like the things that they went through. That's just their way. They wanted to keep kind of the focus forward. But they look back and they are such like optimistic, find the silver lining in everything. So their take on being attacked and robbed by pirates was, thank goodness they didn't throw anybody overboard or hurt or kill anyone. They only took our gold. So when you look at your life through that kind of lens, like looking at what positive things come from it, what is the silver lining, I think a lot of that imprinted on me and the way that I lead my life now.
Absolutely. You can run a lot of tough stuff, like tough family stuff, tough periods that you went through. And your parents are very much still involved in your lives, at your house most days of the week, watching your girls.
Right.
What's that been like, that dynamic, to kind of, you know, tell your family secrets for a greater purpose, which I'll get to in just a moment, but how's it been?
I think, you know, for me, writing this book, I wanted to be as honest as possible, as vulnerable as possible, but there's so much hilarity and humor in the things that we all can relate to. Families are messy, but we are very much an active, multi-generational family. My parents have made all of this possible, juggling a busy career. My husband has a busy career, and we have these 3 daughters, but I'm so grateful to see the relationship they have developed with my 3 daughters. They're such different grandparents. I feel like they're Vietnamese-American grandparents now. They were very much Vietnamese parents to me when I was growing up. So, yeah, it is very much like we are still living what's in that book.
Right. And that's part of why you wanted to do this, right? Like, as was mentioned in Tom's piece, that representation matters. Like, people can read this and see themselves in it. You even, I know last night I heard you tell a story about how you kind of share these stories and you're like, oh, your parents too?
Yes. I mean, so many of us know what it's like to come from somewhere else. So many of us know that our parents made great sacrifices to give us the best lives possible. And so this is very much a tribute to my parents and the incredible decisions that they made and how they did the best with what they had at the time. And when you become a parent, you kind of give that grace to your parents because you realize, oh, okay, these are the things you were going through, and now I see you in a different way, and especially when you watch them interacting with your children. And so not only is it a tribute to them, I think it is very much a love letter to America. My parents really relied on the village around us, our teachers, our mentors, my Taekwondo teacher, Mr. Howe. You know, they just trusted in other adults to make sure that my questions were being answered and that I was getting the information that I needed. We were never going to have a birds and bees talk in my house. We were never going to talk about drugs. It was just say no was the motto for everything. But through the contributions of so many awesome people in my life,
and there's such funny details in the book. Like, you really have to read the book. Like, just about even like American food and your parents and you and like the things that you liked when you were younger. It's just so much fun to read about. In the last 30 seconds we do have to give Brian a shout out because, I mean, people love a love story and you're with your high school sweetheart.
Yes. Well, he likes to be an NPC, as the kids would say. He'd rather be a non-player character hanging out in the background of the video game with no voice.
He was there last night.
But
he was there the night before.
Yeah. I was like, I couldn't write a book about myself without including some of you you since I have known you since I was 14 years old. That is tough to kind of cut you out of the whole thing.
Last night I was like, so have you read the whole thing now? And he was like, I lived it.
Yeah, he lived it, exactly. I think he reads bits and pieces of it, but as I like to say, it's my memoir. It's how I rememoir the events happening. So,
Vicky, I love you so much.
Right,
congratulations. Boat Baby's out now. Go get it, read it, you'll love it. That's going to do it for this hour of Morning News Now. Stay with us, though. The news continues.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.